Hello everyone. Today my focus will be on inverse of a function. Actually, if a function maps every input to exactly one output, an inverse of that function maps every output to exactly one input. Mathematically, we represent inverse of a function as you can see in here. Let's look at the following diagram. This diagram says that whatever we have in the function of f as a domain, it is going to be converted to its range when we are looking at its inverse. And whatever we have in the function of f as its range, it becomes to its domain when we look at its inverse. So let's based on this definition here, let's look at a few examples to see how we can find an inverse of a function. The first example that I have in here is f of x equals to 3x minus 5. For finding inverse of a function, always we have to follow 3 steps. And we'll use these 3 steps for this example and also for the next example in this lecture. So let's look at the first example that we have in here. We have f of x equals to 3x minus 5 and we want to find its inverse. So we want to know what is f minus 1x at the end. So as I said, there are 3 steps, and the first step for doing that is actually replacing the first step, replacing f of x with y. So let's do it in here. Instead of f of x, we write 3x minus 5. The next step is replacing, or basically switching x and y. Switching x and y in the equation. So for here, now we need to switch x and y. Therefore, it's going to be x equals to 3y minus 5. And the very last step is solving for y. So we need to solve and rearrange everything based on y. Therefore, this equation would be 3y equals to x plus 5, and then it's going to be y x plus 5 over 3. And now it's time to say this y is basically the inverse of x, and the final answer for us is going to be f inverse of x is equal to x plus 5 over 3. Let's look at the second example that we have in here. We have f of x equals to x squared minus 1 and g of x equals to a square root of x, and we want to look at the composition of a function. Again, this time we want to find the inverse of f of g of x. So for here, what we have to do is we just need to plug in this square root of x instead of x in here, based on the definition that we have for composition of a function. So from there we can say f of g of x would be f of g of x. So this is the first step. First we have to understand what is f of g of x. Once we obtained f of g of x, we can look at its inverse. So using this definition, we have to, just as I said, we have to plug in this square root of x instead of x squared in here, and then we can obtain f of g of x. So from there we can get a square root of x squared minus 1. So this is going to be x minus 1. Now we have f of g of x, and it's time to apply those 3 steps that we have already seen for the previous example. So now what we have to do is, I'm just going to write, instead of f of g of x, I'm going to write y, which is going to be x minus 1. So this is our first step for making the inverse of this function. The second step, as we discussed, is basically switching x and y. So the second step would be x equals to y minus 1, and the third step is solving for or rearranging based on y. Therefore, it's going to be y equals to x plus 1, and the y that we have in here, is actually the inverse of that function. So this is basically what we have: f of g of inverse of x equals to x plus 1 as the answer of this question. As you have noticed through solving of these two problems, there are 3 main steps, and if we follow these 3 steps, we can easily find the inverse of any function. Thank you very much for watching this video.